Don't let anybody in yet.
Okay, there we go. More live stream.
Let me in.
Okay, wait, live on Facebook. 14 in the way. That's good. Continue. Yes. Connect to Facebook. Bruce logged in with it. I'd like to continue, yes. Okay, to Facebook. All right, I just did this. Why does it keep doing this? What's going on here?
What does this say?
It just says, it's just, okay, there you go.
Okay. Go to Zoom for 20 people.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, admit. Okay. All right, now
Okay,
what?
now make me co-host.
Guess I gotta reduce this. Oh no, I can just hit 3 dots over here. Okay. Yes. Okay, now what? I guess I should start the video. What? Still need to get to Facebook. Live stream, live on Facebook. I don't have access to Facebook account. Try logging into Facebook again. I knew this thing was screw up. Okay. All right. Okay, now what? Okay, I'm on Facebook. Da-ba-da-ba-da. Yeah. Oh, come on. It's not working for me here. Connect to Facebook. This is what happened last time, see? Hello, Richard Prince speaking. Yes, we're trying to get it together. Thanks, bye-bye. Okay, I can't get the connect to Facebook. I can't get this thing to go to Facebook. Don't let anybody in yet? Okay, I can't get onto Facebook, onto Facebook. Shit. All right. All right, 24 people enter the waiting room and I will let them all in. Admit. 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 Yeah.
Recording in progress.
It's my turn.
Speakers, actually gets picked up from.
Got it.
Yep. So we want to just double check also, just to make sure that it's still using the right device. If we click that drop up again. Make sure we're using,
Lecture.
for the microphone, select lectern. Yep, that one.
I really do believe in the mission. And then there's a mother is going steady, but
Oh, no, the baby did really.
my sense was telling me something I didn't feel like I'm getting, like, I just.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks everybody for your patience as we navigate these technical difficulties. Welcome to the Journalism's Roundtable. My name is Richard Prince, and I write a column, an online column called Journal-isms. That's Journal-isms on diversity issues in the news business. This roundtable is an extension of that. We are pleased to be partnering with the NABJ Global Journalism Task Force for this special event, and doubly pleased that Chicago Public Media is hosting it, which is where we are now, Chicago Public Media at Pierre-Pierre in Chicago. We started the roundtable in 1999, and a friend of ours was leaving to pursue a doctorate. She said, keep these going, and we have. Adrian just mentioned, we met every month in various restaurants in Washington, D.C. until the COVID pandemic, when we switched to Zoom. Our participation multiplied, and we hope to have more roundtables that are hybrid, meeting in person, as well as having people on Zoom. This is the 5th one we've had so far. We think of this as an online breakfast, or lunch, or dinner party with the purpose to network and to learn. Some of the networking takes place in the chat room for those on Zoom, so please feel free to make use of it. Special welcome to those who came here from Facebook. Please leave messages in the comment section if you want to reach us. So we're ready to have our panelists. We have some who are abroad, and we have some who are here with us in Chicago. And those who are here in Chicago, I guess the idea is that we should sit up in these chairs. So. All right, we've got 3 of them here. That's good. All right, we have with us Roberson Alphonse, exiled Haitian journalist, who is the 2024 winner of the Percy Qoboza Award from NABJ. Abroad, we have Zahra Burton. Raise your hand, Zahra. Okay. Who's from 18 degrees north in Jamaica, and she's with Global Reporters for the Caribbean, and she's the founder and the principal. So she's in Kingston, Jamaica. We have Muthoki Mumo from the, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Raise your hand. Okay. She's the Africa Program Coordinator, and she's joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. And then here with us in Chicago, Garry Pierre-Pierre, raise your hand, who's the founder and publisher of the Haitian Times, which is in Brooklyn, New York. Also from the continent, Nompilo Simanje of the International Press Institute. Please raise your hand. She there? Oh, there she is. Okay, good, good. She is the Africa and Advocacy and Partnerships Lead in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. And then also with us here in Chicago, John Yearwood of Politico. He's the editorial director for diversity and culture, and formerly the global chair of the Vienna, Austria-based International Press Institute, and he was world editor of the Miami Herald. So without further ado, I want to start off with a very basic question. We're going to start with people who are here. And since we titled this Press Freedom in Black-run countries, why should people care about press freedom in Black-run countries? Let's start with you, Garry.
Thank you, Richard. It's really an honor to be here.
That would really be help if people could turn off their phones.
Hey, Steve. I'm good. How about yourself?
Quick question.
Oh.
Do you have any coordinates with your name?
Yeah, I do. I'll send it to you.
Is to navigate.
How closely are you following Goa?
Not as close as I used to, but you know, I'm following.
I'm in the
Journalism is a crime, and sometimes punishable by death. And so, yes, so that's why it matters. That's why we should talk about it more.
All right, Roberson.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be with you this morning. It's matter because we have to be there to document what happened in our communities, because we are essential to democracy.
Yeah.
To play our watchdog role in our communities. It matters because journalism is essential for democracy. And I think we have to understand that and approach our job like public service and a very essential one to the democracy.
John Yearwood.
Good morning, Richard. Good morning to your guests. Also want to thank you for doing this, Richard. This may be the furthest from Washington you've done journalism. Also want to thank our friends with Chicago Public Media for doing this. Just want to, as I think about why that's the whole thing is important to talk about press freedom in Black-run countries. I'm thinking about the times that I've been in different places in different countries that are run by Black leaders, parts of Africa, certainly parts of the Caribbean, and whether it's in at one point in Kenya when Daniel Arap Moi was the dictator running the country, and throwing a lot of Black Kenyans in prison. In some cases, some of them were killed. The same thing happened in Nigeria under Abacha and others. We should care because we need to care about our brothers and sisters, whether they're in Africa or whether they're in the Caribbean. It's it's in many cases applied for death. So I can't see someone saying we don't care about what's happening to folks who look like us and their struggle for freedom in a number of different areas. I'm thinking like Gitubu Manyera, who was at one point in prison in Kenya, and I haven't been there at the time when the government had kept him in jail until he practically almost died. So we need to care about that. Not only do we need to care, but others in the world need to care. And in the case of Gitubu, there was a large groundswell of support for him, which ultimately got him released. Which, by the way, is a good opportunity to mention it. You hadn't planned to. The news this morning about Evan Yuskowicz, that he's been released. There's a major swap underway as we sit here.
Yes.
So there's some.
All right, thank you, John. And overseas, we have Muthoki from Kenya at CPJ. What is your? We can't see you just yet. What is your answer to that question? Why should we care about this?
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. For the people on the panel, if my voice is okay, just like nod or something so that I can see a visual confirmation that you can hear me. Okay, good. So my name is Muthoki Mumo, and as Richard noted, I'm joining you from Nairobi today. When thinking about this question of why we should care, I thought about it from two different perspectives, considering who's the we, the operative we in the question. And if I consider the we to be me, a citizen in a Black-run country in Africa, the answer is quite obvious. I care because I want a better society, and journalism and independent journalism is integral to that, to my present and to the future of people who may come after me. If the we is perhaps a broader or a we that is removed from those of us living in Black-run countries, the answer, as one of the previous speakers mentioned already, is that we need to care about what's happening to our brothers and sisters. We should care about human rights everywhere. And I would say for that there are secondary answers also to that question. And these include that your voices are incredibly powerful. You are in a position to speak to your elected leaders and to question them about the relationships and the deals and the operations that they have abroad in countries that are Black-run and how they affect our human rights in these countries. Therefore, your voices are incredibly powerful. You should care because of this. On a pragmatic level, the populations of Black-run countries are growing quite significantly. I think if you look at UN data, by 2050, a significant part of the global population will be living in Africa, will be a youthful population. This will have profound and grave impacts on global politics, on things like climate change. So we must ask ourselves, in what conditions is that youthful, increasingly powerful population living? How are they informed? Are they informed by an independent press? Are they informed by an oppressed press? And this will have, grave and broad impacts beyond Black-run countries and on the global population as we move into this century. So those are my immediate thoughts in response to this question.
Thank you very much. Nompilo Simanje from the International Press Institute, based in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Richard, and to everyone. Glad to be joining this roundtable today. I mean, when I thought about this, I think one of the key issues for me was really centered around human rights, the role that the media plays as an enabler for other fundamental rights, and particularly access to information, which is quite critical to help us, across board, even with regard to civil and political rights, socioeconomic rights. So that is one key issue why we should be concerned about, media freedom, particularly in Black-run countries, also because of the history of repression. Most of our countries here have been very authoritarian. We have a history of control of the information ecosystem, which has shifted even now also to the technological landscape. So it's quite important that we think about press freedom in all these countries, and how, it's an enabler for other fundamental rights, but also how that feeds also into promoting democracy and development. But also acknowledging that we are living in an interconnected world. You'd find that there are all these global issues that should be of concern to us, to which the media also plays a key role. So like what Muthoki was saying about climate change, right now there are ongoing global conversations about a UN cybercrime treaty, for example, ongoing conversations about artificial intelligence. So you'd find that in this interconnected digital world, I think we cannot really be fragmented in our approach to these different issues, including our approach to press freedom. So we definitely should care about what's happening to press freedom in Black-run countries, but also even beyond as well, because of that interconnectedness.
Okay, thank you. And I think we need to go to Jamaica. We haven't heard from Caribbean yet. So Zahra Burton, where are you, Zahra? Let's see, Zahra. Okay. And then we'll come back to Zahra a little later. Well, since we have all these people from places where there have been, where press freedom is a question mark, I'd like everyone to just take 3 minutes at most and just tell us what is the state of press freedom in the area that you're covering or from. So we'll start again with Garry.
Well, I'd like to punt to my colleague Alphonse, and I'll come back. I want him to go first because I want to hear what he has to say, because I have a different take on it, but I want to defer to him because he's on the ground and I'm in the comfort of the United States. Okay. So I just want to hear his point of view to me first.
Take it away.
I was in the ground, now I'm going to in exile. I would like to add something about the last question. Yes, we have to take care of press freedom, but we have to have in mind that journalists are the pillar of press freedom. And one of the main questions in my mind we have to ask, how we are taking care of ourselves. With regard to Haiti, 2022 was awful. At least 6 journalists have been killed. That year I survived an assassination attempt. I've been ambushed by gunmen. They sprayed my makeup and I survived miraculously. 2023 was not that bad because we have less journalists physically harmed. 2024, so far it's good. But we have to consider the fact that journalists in my country have come to a certain level of censorship because they are afraid for their own safety. And some of them have to fled the road as their neighbors because of gang violence. And besides that, we have to have in mind that my country is living in a very dire economic situation. 6 years of recession. Have in mind also that with a daily earning of less than $2 for around 6 million of Haitian.
$2?
$2 a day, yes. For 6 million of Haitian. We have around 5 million Haitian living in food insecurity. And journalists are earning roughly less than $300 a month. You can have an idea about what that means for them to have a living. And because of that dire economic situation, it's become harder and harder to those outside to make a living. So there's a lot of Haitian journalists who's currently unemployed. So that's add another level of stress on them. My hope is that things can improve on that level, but we need to be proactive. By proactive, I mean we need you. We need Jacqueline, and Jacqueline is doing a fantastic job. We need Garry, who's doing a fantastic job to keep reporting about democracy, press freedom, corruption. We need deep dive journalism to help protect press freedom. We don't need fast food journalism.
That's what journalism.
Yes, that means people who come around, get a bunch of cliche and write something and leave. For me, it's insulting. You need to dive deep, you need to put context, you need to help raise the voice of our communities, help give echo to the voice of my fellow journalists. I'm living in exile with my partner, Natalie, and I try to heal myself. I survived an assassination attempt. I was badly wounded. And I'm lucky because I had around me my wife, my friends, Jacqueline Charles, Lynette Clementson, who is on the Zoom of Night Wilderness Fellow, who give me a lift to help me go through difficult time. When I say difficult time, I mean financial situation.
Yes.
I mean emotional situation. And I bring it up, that question about us as a journalist, because I'm an example of that. Yes, we are telling the stories of our communities. Yes, we are protecting women's rights. Yes, we keep doing our job, but sometimes deep inside of us, there's a question: is this worth it? Because we are paying a huge price. But for me, it's worth it. I bounced back. I decided to not let the killers silence my voice. I keep writing.
Tell us, for those who don't know, what actually happened to you?
I've been ambushed on October 2022 when I was driving to my radio show. Two gunmen sprayed my car with bullets. I still have fragments of bullets in my forearm. I go through 3 surgeries. Among them, one at the University of Michigan. I still have, as I told you, fragment of bullets in my hands. I went to therapy to have my mind set up, because when you go through that, it's tough.
Did they ever catch the people?
No.
Tell the police story.
No. The police story is, I didn't say it in public, but Jacqueline asked me to do that, because when I drove to the hospital, I reached out to a police patrol. I identified myself. I'm a journalist, and my car was, sprayed with holes. I need your help to go to the hospital. The answer was, I'm sorry, we cannot do nothing for you. That's not my jurisdiction. I was mad, but I had to keep driving to the hospital, and I received the appropriate care. And the thing is, it's tough, it's awful. Yes, it's slightly better in terms of physical harm, and I'm grateful for that, and I thank God for that. But we still have challenging time ahead. We still have difficulties, and one of my main projects is to work on an NGO and to work with existing NGO to give skills to Haitian journalists to help them learn how to navigate in very hostile environment and be avoid as it can be possible physical harm. So I was too long, so
No, you were not too long, and this is why I defer to you. I think your personal story and what you lived through and what other colleagues in Haiti lived through is really unthinkable for us here. And sometimes I feel like kind of a fraud because, I'm called upon to talk about Haiti as I'm an expert or something, but really, these are the heroes of the story. People they don't have any protection, because Haiti is an interesting country, because in many ways, after 1986, when Duvalier left and went exile to Paris, sort of like attack on the press from a governmental standpoint is not really a thing, but it is, because they know that they can put the fear of God in the journalist And the other thing that Alphonse didn't talk about is like the reality for Haitian journalists, where the media outlets cannot pay you. I mean, we joke here that we don't make any money, but in Haiti, they really don't make any money. And so they become susceptible to corruption. Because, hey, I'm lucky to be here, to have a family, but if I were in Haiti, I don't know how ethical I would have been then, excuse me, because there's a basic decision you have to make about what to do. You have a wife, you have children that you need to feed, and you have a politicians with a bag of money, or music promoter, or musicians giving you money to just write about them. You know it's wrong, but there's that reality that you face. And so, Alphonse mentioned about the training. There's very lack of training, formal training in Haiti for journalists. The typical journalist is just like somebody who's eager, just like we all here, and want to do the job, want to tell the story, but they don't have the tools to do that. And so right now, you have a lot of unethical content being produced, and that's really complicating the narrative of Haiti. You call it fast food, we used to call it parachute, but I did. So, and they are contributing to that fast food story ecosystem coming out of Haiti. We just hired 4 new reporters, and we do our own training. We had a boot camp, 3 weeks, where we really put them through very difficult situations. We had the Committee to Protect Journalists come via Zoom and do training about safety and ethics and all of that. So John was joking with me yesterday, saying that I'm tasked to solve Haiti's problems. It's a tall task. No one person can do it.
Okay. All right, John, you want?
First, if I can sort of chime in for a minute, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our friends in on the continent in Africa talking about some stories.
Yeah.
But I remember some years ago when I served as chair of the International Press Institute, I was asked to go to Zambia on an emergency meeting because the then president, Edgar Lungu, had who had been in a fight with the major local newspaper, and he decided one day to just shut the newspaper down, put chains on the door, threw out all the reporters out of work. And what they did was just sort of astonishing. They said, if you close the building, then we'll work on the sidewalks. So when I arrived in Zambia, there were most of the reporters with their desks and their computers on the sidewalk.
Oh.
Turned that into a newsroom, and they were in a clandestine way printing the newspaper probably through the form of a friend. And I was there one day when the newspaper arrived about 1 in the afternoon, and the lines of cars were so long that people were still coming to get the papers. So despite what Edgar tried to do, he wasn't able to snuff out the kind of dissent and the information that the public needed. If there is a great news about that story is that a few years ago, Edgar Lungu lost the election. There's a new president now in Zambia, and we'll probably hear more from our colleagues. But the issue of press freedom, the president has regular press conferences, and he talks about press freedom being a real pillar of his administration. So that fear and that clamp down on the press is gone. And I've traveled different parts of Africa talking to journalists, and the consensus in countries where the press is under severe duress is that a lot of presidents see the press as really bachaks, as they call them, bachaks. Those big ants to be stumped out, and many of them go about systematically trying to destroy the press because it is in their best interest to do so. One of the great things about the content, we're seeing change and so things are changing, but still in some countries, we're still seeing some severe challenges. So I'm looking forward to hear what my colleagues on the continent have to say about that.
Muthoki is in a hand up. Okay, there you are. Please.
So I will address myself to the question in a minute, but I wanted to pull on two threads that are coming up from the colleagues from Nompilo and also from what we're hearing about Haiti. And this is about interconnectedness. And going back to the question about why we should care because we're interconnected. And earlier today, I saw a tweet from a Kenyan journalist who works with CNN about being in Haiti and being in a situation that turned maybe a little bit risky. Shots were fired while he was doing an interview. This journalist, for the entirety of June and I think much of July, was in Kenya covering protests and being in situations where the police are shooting and the police are behaving dangerously and attacking protesters. This struck me as interesting in terms of the dialogue that we're having here, because the police that were shooting in Kenya, the police that were putting this journalist at risk and have attacked other journalists in Kenya for covering protests, are the same police that are now being deployed in Haiti as part of a mission that has a lot of support from Washington. So this is just like, for me, an example of this interconnectedness that we're talking about, that we do not exist in silos, that whether we like it or not, we must be forced to engage with each other. And as human rights defenders in Kenya, when we first heard about this, we thought this is a terrible, terrible idea, because you're exporting the same police officers who are responsible for extrajudicial killings, who act with impunity in Kenya, who've been involved in the assassination of at least one journalist in the last few years. What do you expect is going to happen? The things are going to be different because it's a UN mission now that is supported by Washington. And to try and, for the journalist in Haiti, I know it's going to come up at some point. You're dealing with these, this police force that has this history. How do you engage with that? How do you engage with this? And for the journalists in Kenya, who we must hold our own governments accountable, how can we do that without recognizing the interconnectedness, within the continent and in the diaspora of the issues that we face? I know yes.
Who is raising this issue? Right. Oh, sorry. Might be, but I
can't hear you properly.
Can you hear me now? The question
yes, I can hear you.
Who is raising the issues that you are raising? Do people understand or realize that when you send some of these policemen to Haiti, they might be repeating the same practices that they did over there?
So we, human rights defenders in Kenya have spoken loudly about this. There's a police reform working group whose job is to try to hold the police accountable. And we've spoken loudly about this. And it's not that, the international actors involved in this are not aware. Our government is aware of our concerns. The UN is aware of these concerns. Washington, D.C. was definitely aware of these concerns, including when they invited our president and rolled out the red carpet for him recently, in part because he agreed to this. So people are speaking loudly about this, but the question comes back, we're interconnected in these ways, but are we interconnected in how we fight back against oppression? We speak about it in Kenya and we speak to our government, and maybe we speak to those who do get to be in the room with folks from the State Department. They voice their concerns. But are we speaking to the journalist in Haiti, for instance, and saying, these are the concerns that we have about these police? Are we speaking to American journalists beyond, a small group of foreign correspondents who's maybe when they cover this, they're not covering it with an eye of these connections that we're seeing? And, and are we speaking to human rights advocates in the United States? I don't necessarily think we are. So this is a story that is playing out in a way in certain communities that are siloed. we are speaking out loud to answer your question. The question is, who are we speaking to and who's listening to us?
Okay.
Someone in the room wants to speak.
Oh,
I just would like Jackie Charles to weigh in on this question because she has written a lot about this.
And let everybody know what an acclaimed journalist.
Yes, 3 times or 3 times journalist.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Good morning. So I cover Haiti for the Miami Herald. And I just want to answer to this question since I'm the main person here who has been writing about this. And in fact, last week wrote 2 stories about the Kenyan force and their first big operation when they went out with the Haitian police and basically did not succeed in that mission. Us as journalists, including Alphonse, we are looking at this issue of the human rights question. It comes up whenever you have an international force, whenever you have outsiders who've come in. I think we're sort of getting a little bit ahead of the conversation in that it's been there, it's been discussed. The US and everybody involved is very much aware of this. We are keeping an eye open for it, but we haven't seen it yet. You know, when and if it arises, we will call it out. I mean, right now, the Kenyan police that are in Haiti, they are afraid. I mean, we have seen the video reaction from last week when they went on a mission. They were on a patrol and the Haitian police stepped out of an armored vehicle. They fired warning shots and the Kenyans freaked out and started shooting for at least a minute. And there was no gang gunfire. And then when they went into this town, literally 30 minutes from the US Embassy, and that's only because of bad roads. So it's really like 15 minutes from the US Embassy. And the day that you had a huge US delegation led by Linda Thomas Greenfield, the US ambassador to the UN, and Brian Nichols, who's in charge of Western Hemisphere, the gang was basically taking over the city. And the Kenyans went in, they slept there, they stayed overnight, and then they left. When they were getting shot at, they didn't step out of the armored vehicle. And then when I did the story, the spokesperson basically said, well, we didn't have any food and we didn't have any mattresses, so we couldn't set up a base, and we left. And now the town is literally, I mean, the gang allegedly has cut off the bridge to the town. People in the town next door, which is literally at the border, are completely freaked out because the gang member is promising bloodshed. So it's a very, and we are faced with a situation now where we're getting just lies. It's not even propaganda. So the official people that you're waiting on to get the information from you, you're not even getting the correct information. So you have a country in crisis. You can't always choose who's going to come to help you. Kenya was the only one that raised their hands and decided to do it. But we as journalists that are there, we are keeping a watchful eye for it.
Well, they're leading this. They're not the only one. Just a matter of small detail. But
400 right now.
Yeah, and also the criticism. Part of the criticism is that Washington wanted the blackface to this, and so Kenya is there, and frankly, Washington is leading this behind the scene. There's no way that Washington would let any other nation, not even Canada, take any lead in the hemisphere. So we as journalists, we have to call it Kenya-led, but it's US-led.
US backed and US financed.
Yes.
Can I just jump in again? Because for me, it's just about the interconnectedness of how we look at these issues. Because one of the things when our president went to Washington, D.C., and I think this was part of the agenda, and one of the reasons why he got invited for the state dinner is because he was playing ball, essentially. He's allowing himself to be used to the interest of Washington. And one of the things that we feared and was what it would mean for our human rights in Kenya, that he's being allowed to play this role on an international stage, despite his own terrible human rights record. What is that going to mean for us, and how is that going to reverberate for us? Is he going to become emboldened if the people who are now his new friends do not hold him accountable? And what happened in Kenya over the last 2 months with the protests, with the journalists who've been targeted while covering protests, but also more broadly, civilians who've been arrested and people who've been killed. it feeds into that conversation. You have a leader who felt that he was, big on the international scene, who was perhaps even emboldened, coming back and dealing with these protests in the manner that he dealt with them. I mean, it's not straightforward because we have seen statements from, Washington say, talking about human rights in the context of the protests. But for me, it's just something that we need to keep at the back of our minds. And I'm glad to hear that you are on the ball on this, the lady from the Miami Herald. But it's just something that when we're approaching this conversation, when we're looking at these issues, to just remember that they don't happen in silos, that they're just so intricately interconnected, and that the cause for democracy and for human rights in Black-run countries in Africa and beyond Africa is not something that can be approached or dealt with in a silo.
Richard, let me just say something to, and you hit something on the head, because when he was coming to the United States, I looked at the visit through the lens of Haiti and this king and forth, and in the fact that he wants to raise his global profile when he's got these domestic issues, at home. But I know that in Washington, there were conversations that were privately taking place among think tank organizations and other groups in terms of whether or not they would invite him because of his past human rights records and other issues, before he was president, things that he'd done. And what struck me when I was looking at the coverage that came out of Washington, none of this was raised in Washington. All of the coverage was very sort of wired focus. Here's this visit, the fact that Kenya is going to be the first non-NATO ally that was going to be named. And it goes back to your question in terms of why, why we as Black, journalists are important, because when we look at these issues, you're able to raise these issues through this African lens and through, the issues that we know that are happening in the country. Today, everybody's reading about Kenya because of the protests that are happening, that are happening on the ground. But when he was here in Washington, that was a narrative that should have been raised and raised in the context in terms of, okay, you guys are, rolling out the red carpet, but, Biden administration, how are you coming to terms with this leader and his and his past? And so now what you see is they're all kind of a little bit on a defensive because of the protests, and they're treating it as sort of a separate issue. And yes, we do see a collision, possibly that can happen, because if he's forced to leave office or something like that, for me and Alphonse, it's like, okay, well, what does it mean for the Haiti mission? But there's this larger global context in terms of what's happening to journalists in Kenya. I've seen the videos, I've seen the reporting, the disappearances of protesters. And what we hear on this side is just silence. And that's where you need journalists to call out that silence, especially those who are covering the administration, who are covering foreign policy issues, and to raise that.
Right, very good, very good.
Well, to be clear, this was very controversial in Kenya itself, because the Kenyan parliament was totally against it. They tried to delay it and block it as much as possible until the Kenyan president Ruto spoke with the then Prime Minister Ariel Henry and says, well, if you send an invitation saying we could bypass all this constitution, all the legal framework of this mission. So that's how they would do it. But we are well aware that the Kenyan people, we stand with them. They know this is not right, and Haiti deserves better.
Okay. All right, let me go to Zahra. I see you. Where?
Hello, everybody. I am Zahra Burton, and I'm in Jamaica proper, in Kingston. And I'm really happy to hear this conversation going on about why is press freedom important in Black-run countries. And I'm hearing the debate about Haiti and Kenya. And as I said, I've just been listening for a number of minutes now. And I just wanted to make a contribution as well, because I wanted to say that press freedom is important to me overall, not just for Black-run countries, but I'm glad we're highlighting it in Black-run countries, because that's not necessarily a debate that's usually had. What I can tell you is I was just reviewing the RSF index, press freedom index, and I noticed that Jamaica was actually the top ranked Black-run country. And so I do want to highlight and big up Jamaica where that is concerned, but I also want to point out the fact that we used to be at number 7 and now we're down, I think it's now at 24, right? And so we're right above Trinidad and Tobago, which is another Caribbean country and also Black-run. So I would say to you that the Caribbean countries, relative to some of the others, like we've been talking about, even in the Caribbean, our own neighborhood, Haiti, relative to Syria, Mexico, what's happening in Palestine, we are certainly up there on this ranking, this official ranking. But what I will say is that I have noticed something, which is a level of self-censorship, that we are not aggressively reporting the news as we should in Jamaica. I can tell you that just this week, I was speaking to a PhD student. He's doing his PhD in the UK, but he's a Jamaican journalist, and he was here and just hanging out for a few months to do some research. And he said he's been speaking to different journalists in different mainstream media, and the complaint or the fear among those journalists is that if they do the kind of work that, let us say, I do at 18 Degrees North, which is more on the investigative journalism side, that they'll ruffle feathers, they will be an outcast, they won't have the access that they have to individuals in power now. And I believe that that is a problem for our societies, especially these small societies where the population tends to be under 3 million. In Jamaica, it's under 3 million. In Trinidad and Tobago, it's even lower, under 2 million, I believe. And so you have these societies with hundreds of thousands of people where we're all interconnected, so in so many different ways, you know. So some people who we report on, we know that this person is a family friend, and we still have to go out there and be bold. And there are very few of us that are willing to take that step. I can tell you, as far as the Haitian journalists are concerned, when I look at some of the issues in Haiti, it's really unfortunate. It has really broken my heart to see how many people have died in the business of their journalistic work. It's very, very unfortunate. And I do believe that we could do more to help those journalists to secure better training or to secure, you know, better help. I know, Alphonse, you went all the way to the United States because you had an assassination attempt. And I just believe that I don't know what else can be done to help the Haitian journalists, but it's something that I feel very insecure about, especially because it's so close to where I am in the world, and this kind of instability and what it means for potentially carrying over to here in Jamaica. I know recently we had a death in Jamaica of a journalist, and at first we weren't sure if this was a press-related death in the business of his work. We were also hearing at first it was a gunshot-related death, and so everybody was up in arms. He worked at the Gleaner as a sports journalist, and I was doing my own little checks, and I wasn't hearing that it was necessarily work-related. And then the government, well, the authorities came out, the law enforcement, and said that he wasn't actually killed by a gunshot. He was killed by an object in an airbag. But in terms of the believability, we still have some questions about that. Separate and apart from that, I will tell you the fact that we insisted that the investigation occur, and we got an investigation. We're not happy with the results, but I do believe that it speaks to some level of commitment to some level of press freedom in Jamaica. We have our issues too, don't get me wrong, because I know, for instance, in my case as an investigative journalist, I have felt scared, especially with the online vitriol that I've received. I have experienced a person who I know saying that after a particular time when I had asked a certain question that was very controversial in Jamaica, I was told by one person that he was actually called by somebody to track my vehicle, and do a profile on me, which I found he denied the job, declined to do it. He said he only does that for criminals. That's the line of work he was in, and not for journalists like myself. And he and I just happened to know each other. And so he told me that.
Repeat that about they wanted you to track what? That they wanted to track. What did they want to track?
Track my car. So I just want to make a point that even though we are higher on this press freedom index compared to some of the other Black-run countries where you have the CPJ impunity index rather, and you see other Black countries there, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Haiti, as places where the journalist killers basically get away with their murders. So we in these countries are a little luckier, but I do want to say that even though we are luckier in that the environment allows us to cover, we do have a serious, in my opinion, self-censorship issue when it comes to the temperament of journalists to want to ruffle feathers and hold people to account in the way that they should be held to account. We do, but we don't do enough.
I hear you. Okay, thank you. Now, I noticed that in the thread here, that the comments mentioned Washington. So since we're in the United States, and since we just here at NABJ had former President Trump speak to our members yesterday, I'm wondering, who, by the way, of course, has been known for his comment about shithole countries, whether there is, if you could talk a little bit about whether there is a role for Washington, D.C., and for American journalists in solving some of these issues about press freedom and in your various countries, and whether there was any difference between the Trump administration and all of this and the Biden administration.
Well, I can tell you that there is one program, there's a SHIELD program. I don't know if you've heard of it, and I've actually applied to become a part of this program, and it's a USAID funded program. And they are hoping eventually that USAID will not be the main funder, but that others will come on board as well. But it is in an effort to try and get media houses like myself and other organizations around the world to get legal help. So I do think the government of the United States is trying to secure legal help for different media outlets independently so that they can access this level of support, at least from a pre-vetting standpoint, and of course, post-publication, when you do have different lawsuits. And I will tell you that this is a very important point for a lot of different journalists like myself that should embolden us, because I've been sued 2 times from one report that I did, and this was by the Prime Minister, and this was by the Prime Minister's friend in Jamaica. And I will tell you that the legal bill, luckily we had insurance for media, the legal bill was over, I think it was maybe about US $100 something thousand, and we never went to trial. This was just everything was sorted out prior to going to trial, and this was still the bill. So it is a significant bill. And so the fact that the SHIELD program is available to organizations like mine, I do believe that that's a big help where the United States is concerned. And I should also add that even though we've resolved both lawsuits, we do reserve the right to rebroadcast the episode. And I will at some point, the same episode that I was sued over.
So let me say that I know that USAID, because I also cover the English-speaking Caribbean, so USAID has put a lot of focus over the years on the issue of press freedom, especially in Jamaica, and accessing public records requests, and in doing training out of Barbados for Caribbean journalists. And she's right that we are in these very small societies, and we're subjected to a lot of pressure. I'm Haitian, but I'm originally from Turks and Caicos, and I remember my own brother tried to kick me out the country when I went to do a story on the local immigration firing on a Haitian boat, and a lot of Haitian migrants drowned at sea. So there was a question about, what role the immigration played in that boating accident. And just a couple of months ago, I wrote about the Bahamas Prime Minister blaming journalists in the Bahamas and the reporting of the crime situation for the crime problem in the country. But I will tell you specifically with Haiti, the frustration I have is the lack of attention that is being paid to press freedom being under fire and what's happening to Haitian journalists. Alphonse was lucky that he had a visa, that he could get on a plane. He had me, he had Edwige Dantika, the writer, we had Larry Pierre, thank God. This was just a group of people that we were able to pull together and say, let's help, let's do that. But there are other journalists that we have that don't have the visa, they don't have the friendships, the access, and they're left alone. There's a young man who had fled to the Dominican Republic. He has been jailed repeatedly. I've tried, I've helped. I would say, thank goodness, the Dominican foreign minister had stepped in at one point to assist, but he has been continued subject to being pulled off the streets. I tried to reach out to a particular journalism protection organization to assist him, and he didn't have that. I went up to someone in Miami who works in this area in Latin America and says, hey, we have a lot of journalists, Haitian journalists who are on the run, who have had to flee. They're coming here in Miami. Can we do something similar to what they've done in France? It's sort of online journalism where they're still connected, they still have their sources, they're still interested. It's what they know, it's what their profession is. And can we do something to help them to make a living, to continue with their profession? And they weren't interested. And so this to me is something I'm very passionate about, because we are doing self-censorship. I am lucky in the fortunate sense that I live in Miami, but every time I step into Haiti, that luck goes out. I get the attacks online, but we have to, if we start continuing to do more and more self-censorship and people are not able to go, and finances make it impossible for you to be there on the ground, and Garry, who's doing this wonderful job with journalists in there, but if they're not able to do it, then what happens is that democracy literally dies in the dark. Yes, it's a full thing, but that's what happens, and that's what you feel that is happening. We are subjected day in and day out to all kinds of pressures, from those who are in power, from gang members, threatening you, in terms of your coverage. And I do feel that, especially for Haitian journalists, that Washington has to take this into consideration. When his assassination happened and they put out their human rights report, they claimed that it did not happen because of his press work, and it happened because of his press work. It was the State Department's annual human rights report on Haiti. They mentioned the attempt that happened to him, and then I saw it. I literally went ballistic, because I'm like, where are you getting this information from? And I said, did anybody call you and ask you? No. So it has to be taken seriously. There are issues that they don't want to deal with because it's too much. But today they have to recognize, when you talk about restoring security and stability in the country, when you're talking about you want to go to elections, because you haven't had it for 7 years, that you have to have the media there, and you have to find a way to protect the journalists that are in the country, but also come up with something that when they have to flee, that they are not just subjected to, I'm in the US and I don't know how long I can stay here, I don't know how long I can be here, and I have to make an end to me.
Very briefly, yeah, really briefly, if I can get to the question that you asked earlier about the difference in the two administrations. I traveled in Africa quite a bit during the Trump administration and spoke to ambassadors throughout the continent dealing with the issue of press freedom. And one thing they told me time and time again, that it's almost impossible, very difficult to do their job in terms of the press freedom issue, when back home, they don't have an ally, whether it's in the State Department or with the president saying things like what you talked about. The president said makes their job exceedingly difficult. I mean, certainly with the Biden administration, it's certainly a different time, different conversation. And one of the things that we saw with the Biden administration, I think they gave about $1 million to a press freedom organization in Africa to work on these issues. So that's the big difference, is that and as no doubt there is a lot of, I'm sure, deep concern in different parts of the continent as you look at our presidential election now in terms of who's going to be our president here in the next 6-7 months. Are we going back to the kind of fear and concern that we used to see during the Trump administration, where these organizations were essentially on their own? There was no major support coming from the U.S. government. Certainly, we have support from Mr. Lester said we have support from some of the press freedom organizations, CBJ, National IPI, and others. But having the U.S. weigh in on some of these, whether someone's being thrown in jail, have the U.S. protesting the government against that. That's a really important voice. So folks that are really looking forward to seeing what happens next. And let me just say finally, and this is want to thank you, Richard. Unfortunately, I have a book, so I have to leave soon. But thank you for this really illuminating and very, very important conversation.
I would like to have something to say. We have to have in mind why press freedom is under attack. Press freedom is under attack in various societies, various countries where democracy is in decline. In some countries where authoritarianism is rising. So we need a stronger commitment from Washington to reviving democracy, to stood up for human rights.
Yeah, you're here. Okay.
I would also like to say, in my case, just to chime in about experience with the State Department, there is a U.S. Embassy in Kingston. And I remember after my report on PM Honus here about his house, and that was a very controversial report, the U.S. Embassy here reached out to me to ask me for a meeting. And in that meeting, what they wanted to know was, am I safe? Because there was a rumor that I had received death threats. That did not happen. And I made clear that I was not threatened, in terms of my personal security in that particular instance. And so the fact that they reached out, however, was actually very emboldening for me, because I felt, okay, here is an outlet that if something really were supposed to happen where I felt like my life was in imminent danger, I could actually reach out and maybe get an audience there. So I think from that standpoint, the US did help me. I would hope that they're doing the same thing in countries like Haiti, but based on the record of the number of journalists that have died and the fact that journalists in Haiti, their killers seem to go unpunished, I'm not sure the level of support that Haitian journalists are receiving from the US State Department there.
Okay, now when you say you got a call from the embassy, was that during the Trump administration or the Biden administration?
Well, it was 2016. And I reported in June of 2016. So let me see who was that?
Obama. Yeah.
Obama. Okay.
President Obama.
Yes, speak into the microphone.
All right. All right. Anyway, let me it's Milton Alamadi, and then Porter is next too. So Milton, what did you want to contribute? No, are you there, Milton? All right. You still do. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
You are first.
Thank you for putting this panel on. I want to echo what Garry said in terms of.
Tell us who you are, Milton.
I'm sorry?
Tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. Milton Alimadi. I'm based here in New York City. I publish Black Star News. I also teach at John Jay College and at the Graduate School of Journalism, Columbia. And I'm actually heading to DC soon to start a PhD in history.
And you're originally from?
From Uganda.
All right.
So I just want to make a couple of very quick points. Number one, I publish Black Star News in New York City and not in Uganda for a very good reason. Because in Uganda, I probably would not be able to publish the kind of exposés that I do. And in fact, I remember attending an event where the Ugandan ambassador to the UN was there, and I spoke, and somebody who supports the regime from the audience stood up and said, you wouldn't dare say this kind of stuff in Uganda because you would be 6 feet under. And the ambassador himself actually gave him a thumbs up, okay? But the other point I wanted to make is that we in diaspora can be very useful for journalists that practice in these dangerous environments. The Ugandan journalists that send me information that they cannot publish in Uganda for their own safety. And of course, I do the research, I report, and then I publish without putting them in harm's way. So I suggest that this strategy also be used by others if you can find partners in places where journalists are much safer, as Garry alluded to earlier, such as us here in the United States. So I strongly recommend that. The second point I want to make is that the Kenyan type of protest that is ongoing, now being emulated in Uganda, soon to be emulated in Nigeria, is opening a potentially new space, the so-called leaderless, because now you can't trace any particular individual and arrest them. Everybody is participating. I can see this becoming a very useful platform for also leaking information. Then, of course, that information can be vetted and they can become solid stories. So I strongly recommend that to my sisters and brothers in Kenya. You've started something which is potentially going to be very historic and transformative for the entire African continent. The other point I wanted to make is that there's a lot of hypocrisy. The West talk about press freedom in African countries, and then at the same time, you are subsidizing regimes such as General Yoweri Museveni's 38-year regime in Uganda. He gets about $1 billion a year in US foreign aid. So you're giving him money, and he's one of the most worst human rights violator on the African continent, and then you're surprised when he clamps down and he actually goes after journalists as well. That's, to me, is hypocrisy. Of course, we cannot see the struggle for press freedom as something that's separate from the struggle for democracy and accountability in African countries. So I wanted to make that point as well. And then finally, I think what you have opened here today, Richard, is potentially going to be very transformative as well. Because now journalists in dangerous environments that cannot find partners can actually come to you and share some of the information that they cannot publish in their own countries. And then you can sort of, and I'm sorry that I'm volunteering you for this additional work, you can become sort of a clearinghouse and place this information with other news outlets that may be able to use it effectively. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you for putting this session together. And anybody who wants to get in touch with me also, please feel free to reach me via malimadi@gmail.com. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Milton. All right. Now, let's see. Nompilo had her hand up and she was very patient and waiting. So I wanted to ask you to weigh in on these subjects.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Richard. I mean, it's been quite a heated discussion. And at the time also when I raised my hand, I think I wanted to circle back to the same conversation around censorship. And also because I felt it really tied in very well with the question that Milton had asked in the chat earlier to say, can there be effective journalism under authoritarian regimes? And that's something that we have seen increased self-censorship in all these authoritarian countries. And one of the countries that we've been monitoring quite frequently has been the countries in the Sahel region, those that have been, that are under military regimes right now through the coups, the likes of Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. And you see that, there have been so many attempts by the military regimes to undermine media freedom, to suspend media outlets, to ban the media from publishing politically related news or election related news. And stuff like that. So it's been proving quite difficult for the media to operate in such environments, which is true. But also, in addition to all these other threats, we've also seen this trend around coordinated disinformation campaigns. We have seen cyber attacks, even DDoS attacks in South Africa, in Somalia, in Nigeria, but also, just this environment which is related to like weaponization of laws, using archaic laws, using new laws like cybercrime laws to target the media. So you see that in addition to all these sort of traditional attacks, you see also this increase in new forms of other attacks. So indeed, the environment is becoming more repressive, and I think it's becoming even more difficult for the media to operate. But again, circling back to that issue of interconnectedness and what we can do still to promote independent and free press. I like what Milton just said, because that's something also that I was thinking about to say, I think that there is value in solidarity, there is value in cross-border collaboration, there is value in international advocacy for those that have the capacity to be speaking freely and openly. I think there's an opportunity for the media across the sectors and across the border to work together. And just as we're having this conversation, actually, I remember that here in Zimbabwe recently, our government passed what we are calling the patriotic provisions, which was an amendment to our criminal law code. And the government said this was informed by the US Logan Act. And what they were saying was that it's a criminal offense to be engaging in meetings with foreign agents, and I'm presuming that can even mean embassies, where conversations involve regime change, or where, it can be perceived that you are talking about maybe public disorder or upsetting or overthrowing a constitutional government. And that can mean anything really, that can be interpreted broadly to mean anything. So you find that even like the general civic space continues to shrink across the different countries in the region. And what that means for journalism and generally human rights also is that it's becoming even more difficult to speak up. So it's not just the media, but even human rights activists as well, who are normally also supporters of media freedom and comrades for media freedom. So this is where I think the space comes in for international solidarity, for international advocacy, and cross-border collaboration. So it's still going back to that issue of interconnectedness and realizing the capacity to be able to work together and amplify our message and our advocacy across the different countries. And so I think, which is why I find really strong value having this conversation where it's not just Africa, but it's also not global north or global south. It's really just looking at Black-run countries and what we can do and how we can support press freedom across these countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we want to see if there are any questions, but I also want to, in asking these questions, if some people could address the issue of what the average U.S. journalist can do about any of this. Is it just something that's less nice and then they move on to the next topic, or whether there's a role that ordinary journalists, and in our case, Black journalists, can play in easing some of these issues? Anyone want to ask a question or respond to my question?
Well, I mean, Richard, I think that what you're doing here is really important, and when she was just speaking, and I was thinking about, that is a trend that we're seeing in a lot of places where they're coming at the media through laws, and I really wish that NABJ would take this issue up. I was thinking, like, why are we not at the conference where it's like a standing room crowd? Because these are, important issues, and for years we've talked about having more of an interconnectivity between Black journalists in the United States and Black journalists in the Caribbean and on the African continent. And I think that is more and more important. I mean, my first trip to Africa was through an NABJ program, but I think that NABJ definitely stands to take the leadership in this and to do more on this, because to realize that it's not just a firing squad it's coming at you as a journalist, but that they're finding other ways to do it. And if we continue to have more and more journalists flee, self-censor, kill, then what does that mean in terms of the news and our ability to know really what's going on in these countries and to advocate for change?
I like to
Yeah, you can have it.
Kenneth.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say out loud the suggestion I put in the chat about journalists who.
Oh, but first, Ken, please identify yourself.
I'm Ken Cooper, trying to be retired journalist, even though I have 2 assignments to do today. I'm a Pulitzer Prize winner. I was a foreign correspondent in India for the Washington Post back in the 90s. Long time, off and on NABJ member. What I suggested in the chat, I just wanted to reiterate, I think journalists who report from countries in the Caribbean or Africa ought to write about the press freedom situations there. It's a legitimate news story, and I'm reminded that the story I wrote when I was working in India in the late 90s that had the longest shelf life was actually about how few journalists in India's relatively free press were from the lower caste. And that story gets cycled back every time somebody else looks at the story, looks at that situation. So I think that's one thing. And I think, as Black journalists, when it comes to African and particularly African countries who are rough on journalists, we ought to call them out on it. I mean, the State Department some years ago sent me to Sierra Leone to do some basic training with journalists there about investigative techniques. And I was astonished to learn from them that in Sierra Leone, truth is not a defense in a libel lawsuit.
What?
In other words, it is not a defense. I
Oh
was
my God.
stunned. I mean, what kind of law is that? You can say a politician beats his wife, and it can be true, but you can still be held for libel because it questions his character. And I know Milton Amadi was just talking about Uganda, and the State Department sent me there more recently, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I learned that President Museveni has been heard to say, I believe in freedom of speech. I don't believe in freedom after speech. In other words, you can say it, but if you do it, I don't like it, I'll lock you up. And I saw an example of that when I was there. There was a woman who was a professor who extracted from Museveni before his reelection a promise that his government would provide free sanitary pads to poor women and girls. He got elected, didn't do it. She called him out on it, and in a very artful, anatomical way, basically called him an asshole, and she locked him up.
Stella Nyanzi was her name.
Yes, and she was still locked up when I was there, and I was just stunned. And, you know, we can give Africa some tough love and countries that do that kind of stuff and say, it's not the way to go, and it's not the way to do. It'd lead to better governance if journalists and people had greater rights to free expression and freedom of the press. It would lead to stronger countries, and it would quite frankly, lead to a stronger, more balanced, better world. So we got a lot at stake there.
I think I want to add to, it's more of a comment, and I'm wondering what NABJ can do where this is concerned, because I think NABJ is a very reputable and influential organization. I will tell you that I believe that maybe some of the aid that countries get from the United States, maybe from Canada, and some of the other multilateral organizations, I do think that one of the criteria that should be baked in to this aid is the issue of how the governments treat press. And I do think that if that was one of the criteria in some of these countries, I can tell you that in Jamaica, where I live, there is a definite respect for what those big multilaterals and big organizations and big countries like the US and like Canada say and think. And I can tell you, even with, the Leahy law, I think when it comes to human rights abuses in terms of if you have extrajudicial killings, that is a criteria for not getting aid from a country like the United States. But I think the human rights abuses, even though I think there is a provision for journalists, I do think that that needs to be more pronounced in the fact that, because at one point I will tell you that under the Leahy law, I think Jamaica was at risk, or the United States had actually withdrawn support for our security forces because of some human rights abuses. But when it comes to journalists, I just believe, and this is not just Jamaica, as I said to you before, because even our prime minister, or, our government has said some crazy things over the years that really call into question their commitment to press freedom, which is why maybe under this administration, our ranking, I mean, I know that RSF changed the way that they rank countries, but maybe one of the reasons is in part because our rating used to be in 2013, when I came back from the States in 2012, our rating at 2013 around that period was 7 on the index. And in fact, we were the highest in the Western Hemisphere. And as I said earlier, we're now 24. So we have fallen. So even though we are maybe among the Black-run countries at the top, highest ranked, when it comes to the overall index, we have fallen drastically. And so I would say to you that I believe that aid should be tied in to one of the criteria should be how much are you protecting journalists and investigating killers of journalists, because more needs to be done, as Jackie had said earlier, where Haitian journalists, for instance, are concerned.
Is Charles Ray still online? I wanted to ask Charles because he was a U.S. ambassador. Okay, not with us though. Okay, we're running low on time, so.
Yes, I would like to raise point, I think it can be useful. Prior to my tragic experience, I didn't know CBG. I knew about Reporter Without Border. I didn't know about McWallace Fellowship. I didn't know nothing about Alfred Friendly Fellowship. And I find out those angels exist. I don't know if Lynette Clemenson, who was leading the McWallace Fellowship, is
And it was
still,
also online.
if she's also online,
Yes.
I would like to underline and highlight that fantastic work going by those people, those angels. And I also like to underline the financial support they receive from some organization like foundation and others. That's very important. And at the beginning, I raised a very important question. Who is taking care of us? How we can taking care of ourselves? So that's can be useful. And while I'm listening, comments and stories from my fellows from Africa, I have in mind that they need those information. They need to know that they can reach out specific organizations to receive help if they're facing legal challenge, if they're facing life threatening and other issue. I don't know if Lynette Clemenson is still there, and if you want to add.
Her name is up there.
Yes. If you want to say something, her mic is up. So it's very important to underline that.
Okay, thank you. Sizwe Adekoye, if I pronounce that properly, and then Milfoot. Please be brief, though. Okay. Sizwe? Okay, I will go to, oh, I see you're there, but we don't hear you.
He's not saying anything.
Oh, maybe you can't hear us.
Okay, am I on? Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Sizwe Adekayode, and I'm based in Halifax, Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I have listened with interest on the topic, which is a well-chosen topic, and it's obviously of a great concern, not only to all of you that do this type of work, but also to your family members, etc., etc. I feel as though I'm a bit of an imposter in the sense that I don't work more in your capacity. I am the main publicist for just one organization, and that organization is the African Heritage Universe. And what we have discovered is that over the years, that depending on the topic, most of our communication is by email, sometimes social media. And what we've discovered is that depending on the topic, it might be completely ignored by nefarious types of people, or there'll be sabotage. For example, our main event every year is what we now call the African Holocaust Remembrance. And we've been doing it for 10 years, and we switched the name about 7 years ago to African Holocaust Remembrance, because we felt that captured, in essence, what our ancestry has endured for centuries in all kinds of forms. I don't need to elaborate to you guys. So as soon as we switched that name, we started getting all kinds of technical problems with our communication. For example, our website featured links to various events, all Black events that were sort of complementary to ours, etc. And about 3 months after we put those links out, we went back to the links, and all of them featured Jewish Holocaust events. It was incredible, and we had to painstakingly delete them and change our approach. That's just an example of the type of interference, you could call it sabotage, that we've experienced, but this has to do with the topic rather than, in this particular instance, we're talking about black led countries. But I think it's the same idea of interference because somebody doesn't like, or someone doesn't agree, or someone doesn't want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you.
So
let's move on to Mel Foote, who's the founder of the Constituency for Africa.
Great. First of all, Richard, I want to congratulate you for a very outstanding conference. This has been somewhat historic. One of the issues I raised in the chat room was, is this part of a global white supremacy movement? We talk about Project 2025. I maintain it's been in place for like the last 20 years or more, if not longer. And I think one of the issues have been the demise of Black media. Where is Jet Magazine? Where is Emerge Magazine? Black Enterprise is not what it used to be. Ebony is not what it used to be. Black Paper, all of the sponsorship for Black publications have dried up. Support for organizations like mine, which work to educate Americans about Africa, has dried up completely. And so, part of the challenge is Black media is also being exploited. We saw yesterday an NABJ conference featuring Donald Trump. Whoa, I don't want to get into that too much, but I just really want to say congratulations. I think the conversation is excellent. And to me, this is just the beginning of a greater conversation about Africa, African Americans, and Africans in the diaspora going forward. So thank you very much for hosting this, Richard.
Thank you, my pleasure. Okay, we're running low on time. Does anyone else want to, Lynette, are you still there, Lynette Clemenson?
I'm still here. I've just been listening.
Okay, well, your name was mentioned.
Yes.
Yes, I mentioned you, Lynette, because prior to my traumatic event, I didn't know you even exist. So my point is to my fellow journalists and those who are living in the continent in Africa and facing challenges, I want them to hear from you about what help they can receive from Knight Wallace Fellow and others in the field of journalist protection, and then help them move forward in their career.
And that goes to I asked the question, what can American journalists, particularly Black journalists, do to help some of these, help solve some of these problems?
I mean, I think in terms of Roberson, very early in the conversation, mentioned wellness. I think that we talk about coverage, of course we should, but
I never introduced you as the head of the Knight Wallace Fellowship.
Sorry about that. Yes, I run the Wallace House Center for Journalists at the University of Michigan and the Knight Wallace Fellowships, and I connected with Roberson through a former fellow soon after he and Natalie went to Miami, and encouraged him to apply for the Knight Wallace Fellowship. And we do a lot of work with journalists under threat, journalists in exile from a wide range of countries. And, one of the things that to me is a constant when we talk to journalists who are fleeing persecution or some sort of physical danger. And Roberson, when I first met him, had just come through a surgery and still had very visible wounds, is when you ask them what they want to go back and continue reporting. And so we all need to support people being able to continue in their work, but I think also giving them the holistic support that they need to do that in a healthy way. And one piece of that is to be able to deal with the trauma of what they've experienced and the unique pressures that they're under. There are all of these ethical pressures and pressures of corruption, and those take as much of a toll on people as as an actual bullet or a beating. And so for reporters to be able to continue, I think that a lot of times, you know, I mean, it's interesting for me that I work with journalists like Roberson, who are literally trying to write with their hands in bandages. And I think sometimes American journalists don't realize, even in the face of course, all of the pressures that we have here, being asked to go back to your office and work in person is like not a real hardship compared to being shot at. And so, you know, and it takes a lot of time and care. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours Roberson and I spent together and just talking about how do you get ready and prepared to go to therapy? What does it mean to seek therapy? What exactly are your goals? What are you trying to do? Does it mean you are weak to seek therapy? No, it doesn't. All of these things, and Roberson, I'm sure you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't asked you to speak now, but but I think when we are adding support, we need to add our voices. We need to add actual resources, meaning financial support, and organizations that realize the full suite of things that it takes to get people back on their feet. I mean, we're tremendously proud of Roberson for receiving the prize this year, but I will say, you know, for NABJ, when you give a journalist in exile a prize, you also you should be ready to cover their conference fees and to make sure they can come to the conference. And you know, that it is one thing to stand in the room and applaud someone, and that show of emotional support as a group is important, but there are many, 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 many concrete things that people need over the long term. And one of the things that we've been working on is that, you know, fellowships like mine were really designed for a different time in journalism, when people could come for 1 year, one academic year, and the expectation is that at the end of the academic year, the person is going back to a safe full-time job at a news organization in the United States or in another country. And that model is somewhat out of date for the US, you know, for our conditions in the US right now, where people don't have a lot of job security, and certainly for a situation of journalists in exile. So we have to build more bridges between organizations, not see ourselves as competitors, but see ourselves as in collaboration with one another, talking about, okay, I can help for this period of time, and then who can step in to help after that. So the University of Missouri, after the Knight Wallace Fellowship was done, I worked with a colleague at Missouri, and Roberson and Natalie went and spent time as friendly fellows at the University of Missouri. So it's just a complex patchwork of support that is needed. And I think that, you know, I applaud you for this conversation, because the first thing we all need to do is just to start talking about it. And when we talk to people and hear what their struggles are and what their needs are, and then start talking to people about how we support editorially, financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically, then I think we can begin to move things forward and provide real support for people.
Okay, Jacqueline.
Richard, what I'm hearing Lynette say, and Gary's not gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it, it's we need a fund. After the 2010 earthquake, NABJ supported Haitian journalists by gathering laptops, and John Yearwood isn't here, and he actually led that charge. And I remember him bringing those laptops in his suitcase, so we don't get slapped with, you know, customs issues. and things. But one of the things that have keep coming up is that it has been a patchwork. It's been a patchwork to support journalists on the ground who need help. It's a patchwork to support organizations like Garry. Imagine those of us who are from mainstream media and the financial challenges being faced. So imagine when you are from an ethnic or Black media. I mean, I heard Foot about, the conspiracy, but the reality is that Black newspapers and Black media companies haven't been immune to all the things that are happening in mainstream media. But it is taking effort. It's like looking for grants, looking for money, and then trying to articulate what it is that you're doing and why it is that it's important to do. So this is an organization co-founded by one of my favorite professors, who's the reason why I'm in journalism, the late Chuck Stone. And I think that today, we need to take it to the next level. And that level is putting our money where our mouths are, and finding a way to create some sort of a fund where you have grants, people like, Garry and what he's trying to do, they're able to tap into that. There's assistance there for other organizations, because there are organizations, there's one in particular I know in Haiti, I'm not going to mention, but they were able to get some financial assistance to help some journalists on the ground, but it's dangerous for them to even talk and to publicize the fact that they have it, but the needs are there and the needs are great. And that is something that I see that NABJ can do. Other people are doing the work for us, but it's time for us to take charge of our own and also recognize that.
And I can just add just one quick thing about giving the devices. I think also, a strong sort of fund would also provide training. One of the things that we've talked about is when you're in situations with danger, you need to know how to use your devices to protect against surveillance. To have IT connections, to know when you need to change phones, how you keep your laptop safe, how you scrape it periodically to make sure that your sources and your own personal data aren't compromised. How to, when you're trying to report in exile, use technology to be able to see things on the ground when you can't be there physically. And so being able to provide kind of high tech training also to allow people to continue to do their work would also be a very useful resource through some sort of fund that we could put together.
Great, thanks on that. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with what Jackie said is that for the last year, to the chagrin of many, I stopped writing for several reasons. But one of them is that I wanted to concentrate my efforts to this conversation that we're having. Because I think one more column from Garry Pierre-Pierre doesn't mean anything. If really this basic needs are not being addressed. And so that's what I'm doing now. I came to Chicago partly to talk to some foundations here to really do some of this work, because it's really, it pains me because what happens next? I mean, we want to have elections in Haiti in 2 years, but journalists are fleeing. So who's left to talk about that? And, we have to deal with that. It's not just sending the Kenyans or whomever with the guns to help pacify the situation, but, democracy depends on an independent and free press, which does not exist today. The Nouvelliste, the news organization that Alphonse still works for, I mean, they were attacked. They were attacked.
Underlined, the burn.
Yeah,
Underlined.
exactly. And it's, I don't know how they're functioning, really. Most of the reporters are here driving livery cabs and doing whatever. I mean, I take Uber all the time, so there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what they do. They cannot practice their career professions. And what I'm trying to do is to integrate them in the Haitian time style, at least until they decide to go back to Haiti, is to continue to practice the craft that they went into because of love and passion.
I don't know that we keep working, we publish online because historical office was attacked and vandalized in March. Yes, in March. And it's hard, but the owner and the editorial decided to keep moving. Even if it's hard, there's no economical model, there's nothing to earn from a subscriber, no subscriber, or my subscriber. So it's tough, it's hard, but we keep doing our best and hope better days ahead. But honestly, I didn't see any light at the end of tunnel so far.
Yeah, the journalists have had to have had to go with periods with not getting paid. The ads that are being run on their morning program, the Roberson is still on every morning. These are like old ads. These are, they're not new ads. So there's no fresh revenue that is coming in. And you have Radio Garry, which is also a radio station whose office is also downtown Port-au-Prince, so it's also attacked after this whole gang uprising. So there are things that are happening in media that we don't see. There's another company that ended up just shutting down. So this whole crisis starts to affect the journalism. And in Creole we have this thing called Miko, which is a microphone merchant, where is susceptible to the whole issue of corruption. And you start to see when people are being paid, and what it does for those of us who are not being paid, who have ethical standards. One, it makes us targets, and it also undermines media and the press and what it is that we're trying to do. So it's another kind of threat that that's happening. So I go back to, I think that this organization can start by this is an important conversation, and taking it to the next level and saying, okay, how can we support journalists in the Caribbean and in Africa, journalists who are under fire. I'm very happy the Wall Street Journal, the journalist got out. I mean, his boss is Ann Simmons, who is a Black journalist who was in charge of the Russia bureau for the Wall Street Journal, that pulled her out immediately. But she has the benefit, and he had the benefit of having the Wall Street Journal behind him. But there's so many other journalists, the majority of whom, they don't have it. When I go to Haiti, I mean, got to figure it out. We all keep in touch with each other. There are things that we do. We didn't even get into that conversation, but we have to recognize that we want to keep this going, we're going to protect press freedoms. We have to move it to the next level.
Okay, Milton's had his hand up, Milton Alamadi. And then we want to just hear from those who haven't said anything. Okay, Mohammed. Oh, Mohammed, you haven't said anything. You still there? Your hand is up. Your mic. No, your mic is maybe not.
Yeah.
Mohammed, your hand is up. Are you still there?
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank
Very
you,
good.
guys.
Good to see you. Tell us who you are first, and then make your point of question.
Yes, my name is Mohammed Keita. So I was the Africa Advocacy Coordinator at the Committee to Protect Journalists between 2007 and 2014. So I interacted with NABJ back in the days. I remember the last convention in Chicago, maybe 10 years ago, where there was a whole ruckus with the visiting president of Senegal at the time, who at the time, actually, there was talking about interconnectedness. At the time, actually, the issues that he was causing at home, especially with the press in Senegal, caught up with him in Chicago, and he was the target protests at the time. So that was interesting. But my question here really is about journalism students, the next generations, and I'm thinking about HBCUs, at the HBCUs. I'm very curious to know if there are any efforts to, in the curriculum or at those schools, to kind of make those connections more apparent to the journalism students, because I believe that's really when these efforts need to start, so that journalism students are aware of these interconnectedness, and kind of are, when they go into the profession, working for mainstream outlets, they have a foundation, they have an understanding of the issues in Black-run countries, in the Caribbean, in Africa, etc. And they're able to kind of be more useful, because as you know, one of the biggest problems in the US media is its parochialism. And so to deal with that, I think you need to start earlier in the way you train journalists and making sure that they're aware of the risks that other journalists are going through in other countries, but also aware of the issues and the affairs in the other countries. Right? So yeah, so that's my question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think some people would say one of the other issues in the United States is getting people to consume serious media in the first place. That's an issue with the changing of our media habits and the gravitation towards social media and less reliable, fair disinformation and all that. But that's certainly a good point. Anyone else want to? In fact, we should. Go ahead. Somebody said yes.
Can I? Sorry.
Introduce everybody. Go ahead.
It's,
who's speaking?
It's Muthoki. It's me.
Oh, yes. Yes, please.
So I mean, we could have a whole seminar series just to speak about the issues that we're speaking here, but I think I just sort of as my closing remarks wanted to address myself to this question about what can journalists in America specifically do, and you know, the first thing I think is ask questions and ask them continuously. I think what Mo is saying about the president of Senegal, it's always so useful when people who are oppressing journalists in this region travel and they get asked the kind of questions they never get asked at home. And ask those questions and ask them repeatedly, even if it's not resorting, you know, in a scoop or in something, putting them on the spot at a global forum is very important. And you do have the right to ask these questions because sometimes the reasons they're able to operate is because of your taxpayer money. They're being subsidized, they're being supported. And in other situations, it's not just the government, it's also private institutions, corporate entities, other types of organizations that are dealing with these governments and emboldening them. I'm going to put you on the spot more because we discussed this in advance. But one of the things Mohammed, you know, pointed out to me when I was coming to speak here was that there's the NBA has been in the news recently, and basketball has been in the news with the Olympics and like Team USA playing against South Sudan. And one of the things that people don't know is that one of the strongest partners that the NBA has on the continent is Paul Kagame in Rwanda. The man who's in charge of a government that is responsible for throwing YouTubers who criticize him behind bars. Some of them have been tortured. People detained for not, you know, having a license to be a journalist. And there are so many of these connections that just exist everywhere between our continent and the US. If you look at Uganda with the Anti-Homosexuality Act that has implications on freedom of expression and human rights broadly, and you look at who's funding that and who's pushing that and their connections to the United States, you start seeing all the avenues where questions can and must be asked. So for me, asking those questions, putting those people on the spot. And my second point is on exiled journalists. I know this has been spoken about repeatedly, but it bears repeating. What we've seen over the last few years with conflict in places like Sudan, Ethiopia, is that a lot of journalists are going to exile and they're being stuck in limbo in neighboring countries, unable to do their jobs safely, but unable to also move on. And one of the things we've been, you know, advocating for as CPJ is looking at immigration rules and whether there are allowances that can be made for journalists. So for instance, emergency visas for journalists. Because for instance, if a Rwandan journalist goes to exile in East Africa, and they ask me, do I think they're safe in East Africa? I'm going to say they need to get out because we see the level of transnational repression. But where do they go? Europe is a fortress. South Africa is not safe. If you're going to go across the continent, you're stuck waiting months and months and months, literally unable to do anything, sometimes having to live in, self-imposed house arrest. It's the same story for Ethiopians. So consider when you're having conversations with lawmakers in countries, whether conversations about the ease of movement for journalists, your brothers and sisters around the world who are at risk, can be part of that agenda. And my last point is, consider whether the justice that we seek might actually be found within your borders. Over the last couple of years, there has been discussion about the Gambia and how after Yahya Jammeh, a lot of the atrocities that happened under his government, people are finding justice in places like in Germany, and I think there might even be a case in the United States. So the people who oppress others in, Black-run countries in Africa, they sent their kids to school in the United States and in Europe. They holiday there. They have properties there, The money that is being taken from us and through corruption, and the journalists who are being oppressed, for covering that corruption, has direct connections. So if we cannot find justice here, can justice be found within your borders? And what does that look like? And there's precedent. And so I think it's great that we're having these discussions, because this is the entry point to, the bigger goals that we would love to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Lynette, you have your hand is still up. Did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I'll just quickly second the point that Muthoki just made about journalists in exile. One, I think, very simple organizing thing that we can do, either through Journal-isms or through NABJ, on emergency visas for journalists. After the situation in Afghanistan, after the fall of Afghanistan in 2021, Canada put in place an emergency visa system for journalists that allows a special visa entry that we don't have here in the United States. It would be a very easy thing for us to do. There's a model for it in Canada, and I think if there's an advocacy arm within our organizations, that is something that we could easily pull our voices together to advocate for, because the situation of journalists needing to flee their countries is not going to get better in the short term. It's likely going to get worse, and so we need to make it easier for the people who do end up here.
Lynette, on that point, can you just go over, if you know, just no pressure, if you know, how does that work? Because I have had sources, I think one person, let's say one source, who was asking, if I tell you some stuff, where can I go after if my life is in danger? And it's really a question of, I don't know.
You mean a source asking you that? I'm speaking specifically about visas for journalists, so it wouldn't apply to sources.
Right, but I'm just saying in terms of journalists, what you know, could you at least give us some guidance, if you have, about how the Canadian program works?
So my understanding of the Canadian program is that they currently have 500 spaces a year set aside for emergency situations. Of course, they vet. They would want to vet to make sure that there's a credible, clear danger to the person applying, and that the person is identifiable as a working journalist. But I don't know what that clearance process looks like, but my understanding is that in the case of some journalists from Afghanistan, it has been able to move much more quickly and move people into being able to convert to residency status within 3 years. And
okay.
And in in the United States, even getting your biometrics and moving through the asylum process in under 3 years is almost unheard of. So I don't know, there may be other people on the call who are more knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, the Canadian program is not consistent because, as I mentioned, there's another journalist in Haiti who survived an assassination attempt, was almost killed. And he's been stuck in the Dominican Republic, and he wanted to go to Canada. And this was being worked on at the highest reaches of the Dominican government. And the Canadians basically said that no, he cannot go to Canada. In order for him to have protection in Canada, he needed to be on Canadian soil. But there is IHCR, which is the United Nations Human Rights Group. So one of the first things that I would tell the African journalists, if you have a journalist who has to flee or who is fled and they're in the country where there is the UN and IHCR, make sure you register with IHCR, because the first thing when a country is trying to help you or you get into an immigration issue, one of the first places they go to sort of verify, who you are or your problem is able to reach out to the United Nations. This is what happened in the case of this young man when he was pulled off the street in the DR and was on the border getting ready to be deported. The first thing that the foreign minister did was he checked with IHCR. And just a side note, I was actually trying to send the number of the foreign minister to a human rights person in Haiti because I was, trying to keep that wall, and I mistakenly sent his number to him, and then he said, Jacqueline, you sent my number. I said, yeah, so there's a situation, and I explained to him, and I will say this to Foreign Minister Alvarez right away, he got involved, and he stepped in. But that journalist is still sort of in limbo. The way it works in the United States, some of these journalists find themselves moving through the daring gap along with other migrants who are trying to come here. They do not get any sort of special disposition or treatment because they're journalists. If you're allowed into the United States, at the border, then, you have to go through a credible fear interview as well. You have to go through the same process, and asylum in the United States takes an average of 7 years before they even get you your application and they decide whether or not you can even stay. And oftentimes there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to remain in the US. There's documented cases of Mexican journalists who have been almost killed, who were put into US detention, rejected, and then forced to go back to Mexico. And I think in one case that journalist was actually killed. So again,
two recent cases of Mexican journalists being killed.
yes, so you're not asking for a special disposition, but at the same time to recognize that this journalist that is fleeing or able to flee, that they do have a special case. And again, in the case of Haiti, it's only journalists who have a US visa. If Alphonse did not have a US visa, and if he had gone to the US Embassy and asked for an emergency visa to come to the United States, it would not have been given, it would not have happened. And in fact, for you to come to the US for medical care, you need to be able to put down, hundreds of thousands of dollars to guarantee that you're going to be able to pay that bill before an air ambulance can go and to take you out. So it is a very, very challenging situation for journalists who are trying to go someplace and trying to get protections.
On the Canada, can I just say something about the Canada? I just want to echo. I want to echo what has been said. It is something, but there are great deficiencies. I am aware of people who've waited months, even over a year, trying to get on it's a scheme for human rights defenders if we're talking about the same thing. And if you consider the number of spots, 500 including family, and assume that, if you have a spouse, 2 kids, that's 4 spots gone. Because sometimes, you can't leave your family behind. They'll be at greater risk without you there to protect them. So it's something, but does not meet the needs, does not even begin to meet the needs. And I hear you about UNHCR, but for countries where there's a lot of movement, in Kenya, for instance, on average, you come to Kenya, you're waiting months just to get the initial recognition that you're an asylum seeker. Then you wait years sometimes to get your status as a refugee determined. And this does not include that country relocation. So in places like Kenya, where the law says you have to stay in a refugee camp, where there are rations, you can start to see where there's infiltration of security agents from your home country. You can start to see the kind of mountain that you have to climb just to even, get to a safer space. When we said emergency visas as CPJ, they need to be emergency visas. Yes, you need to do vetting, but I believe what our team said is if you're not given it within 2 weeks, it's not an emergency visa. It's something else. So just to say, there's great need for, just ease of movement. I think there's a quote that you don't leave home unless home is a shark's mouth. So there needs to be recognition that journalists are fleeing really dangerous situations. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there. I'll put some links in the chat about the Canada scheme and our recommendations in terms of emergency visas.
All right, thank you. All right, we're gonna get into our introductions. Just introduce yourselves, and if you have an observation to make, that's all to the good. I see Jeanette Pinckney. Still there, Jeanette? Okay.
Yes, just.
Yeah, no, just to see who's who. Anolu, Kojo, any observations or questions you want to make? Colette, Michael Hill. Okay, we'll then go, Kwame.
So thanks, but thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, how about in this room? Anyone have any final? Okay. Yes. Oh.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Robbins. I'm actually not a journalist. I am the wife of the journalist, of Jack Green, but I am also a lawyer, a civil rights lawyer. And I'd say the one thing that journalists here can do and must do, because our democracy anywhere depends on having a free press, is have courage. And they must be courageous, and we must encourage them. So I urge us to all be willing to stand up and speak truth to power.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thanks, everybody. We're going to wind down, and we're going to print out the comments in the chat room and make them available to everybody who's on the call, for whom we have an email address. So thanks very much. This is a first for us, being out of town like this, and I want to thank our host. Gilbert, do you want to say anything? Okay, thanks to Gilbert Bailon and from WBEZ and Chicago Public Media. And I see Norman back there as well. Thank you, Norman. And we'll see you next month, and I'll let you know what the subject is and where we're going to have it. So
Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.